Okay, I'm going to show how I do decreases on the Addi machine here. I'm using the Addi King size 46 pin, and where I'm doing decreases, in this case I'm doing it for sleeves. So this is a sleeve that I've been working on, where I started off with 43 stitches at the cast on, and then I gradually decreased one stitch at either side every 14 rows, and then ended up with something like 33 stitches at the end here. So it will look very similar to this sort of diagram that I'm showing you here. What this demonstrates here is, here for example, I've got 24 stitches on the cast on, and I'm going to decrease one stitch either side 3 times, so for a total of 6 stitches to get 18 stitches at the end. So what happens is, in a decrease, is that each row a decrease will take place, if and it will take 2 rows to do a decrease for either side. So you will, in this case I'm decreasing every 10 rows. So I would, on the 9th or on the 8th row, or the 9th, yeah, the 9th row, which will be a right side row, I'll crank forward to the end of that row and do a decrease here, and then on the way back at the end of the row, which is a wrong side row, cranking backwards, I'll do a decrease here. So it'll be 8 rows of straight and then 2 rows of decrease action, and then I'd repeat that until I've got my 18 stitches, so based on, say, 34 rows, etc. So this is just an example. So what I've done here is excuse my voice, I've cast on 24 stitches, and now I'm going to work 8 rows. So what happens, well, if your counter has gone kaplooey like mine has on the Addi, I'm using a click counter and set it to 0, and I will now work 8 rows of straight knitting. Sync that last one, click, that's row 1. Sync that, and then click, that's row 2. 3, 4, 5. Of course, you don't need a counter for some short rows like this, but I always find it helps if I'm doing continuous stuff. 7. Right, this is, now we're coming to the 9th row, and this is where we're going to do our decrease. Now you will need a loom hook or some kind of, I think a loom hook is probably the best tool for this. So, and in order to do the decrease action, so we'll crank forward for our right side. So this is row 9. Now before we get to the end of that row, we'll get to the last 2 stitches, and just as the last stitch pops up, you pick it up off the hook with your loom hook, if you can see that. I'll try and zoom in a little bit. Right, I'm picking that stitch off, the last stitch off, and I'm actually just going to place it on the raised stitch, which is 1 stitch before the end. And then now that that's on, and both stitches, there's 2 stitches sitting in front of the teeth, the little fangs there, so they sit just in front of them, and then I'll just sink that last stitch, and so now I'm 1 stitch less at that end. So I will grab those. Right, now work to the end. Now this is now the 10th row, and I'll do the same thing here. The very last stitch, I will pick it off the pin like so and place it on the second to last pin there, and make sure it sits in front of the fangs or the teeth, and then sink that last stitch. So essentially that was 10 rows in total, and I'd repeat that. So I'm going to now work 8 rows straight. So now I've got 1 less stitch to work from now, or 2 less now. 2. 3. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. Right, that's 8 rows done. And now I'm going to work the 9th row, which is the right side row, cranking forwards. So I work to the last 2 stitches, raise those 2, but don't grab the second from last one until you pick off the very last stitch off the hook there, off the pin, and place it on and down in front of the teeth, and then sink that stitch, and then work backwards, grab those carefully. Last decrease here on this side, pick that pin, that stitch off that pin. Now if you've gone too high, which it looks like I have, I can actually go backward a little bit. That's it, and it won't affect the neighbouring stitches in any way. And just place that on, and then sink that pin. So that's the second decrease done. So now I'll do 1 more, so I'll work 8 more straight rows all the way to the last 2, come up a bit, pick you off and place you on, boom, down you go, all the way to the last 2, too high again. That's it, it will come off, it just needs a bit of manhandling. And down. So, and then you can finish off by, you know, depending on how many decreases you're intending to do, you can, and I always find it's helpful to have a couple of extra rows of straight knitting afterwards, just to even out the panel that you're trying to knit, and then that will sort of help cement these edge stitches. So what I'll do now, if I just I'll just take this off, really, it doesn't matter. You would normally just bind it off anyway, so it'll be difficult to see on something like this because it's just so curly. But you will see here where the cast on edge is wider than the cast off edge at the other end, so there's clearly some shaping has been taken place here. And you can't really see the decreases all that well on there, There'll be a sort of evident knot where the stitch is slightly thicker than, say, all the other edge stitches, so that there's a decrease there, there's a decrease there. But on the right side, it can't really be seen all that much. And in any case, you will be seaming that anyway when you come to it. If it's a sleeve, you will end up sewing that edge in anyway. So that is example of how to do decreases, and that's the schematic on how you would do it. Okay.